Diving deep into the dark abyss of the ocean, this is where our adventure begins. Climbing into this giant submarine, we're greeted with the hardy crew of this fine vessel. They seem to be having some trouble. Specifically, they detected a sonar signal that sounds unlike anything they've ever heard before.
It's turbulence, we're in its wake. Help!
Whatever's out there, it's going at 80 knots. Translation, it's going really fast. The captain makes a full position check with the sub. Then one of them says it's getting close, and the anomaly out there just got faster. Well, it did just swim by in a gigantic, creepy manner and made the sub crash to this crevice. But nope, we don't know what's out there, and the entire crew goes into a panic after the collision. Water starts rushing in, and fire from the sub's equipment breaks out.
We're losing her.
The sub is descending fast, and it looks like the captain faces lethal facts. So he orders this buoy to be launched. Buoy deployed, and now crash. The water flows in so fast that the sub sinks way faster and is eaten whole to the abyssal depths. The buoy makes it to the surface. Then, a helicopter escort comes landing at his sea outpost. Looks like they're from the American Navy, and the troops brought something with them. Enter Lindsay Brigman, and she doesn't look so threatening, right? Well, some of the workers have already gotten chills down their spines, so we'll see. Moving over to the control room, these clowns are busy overseeing an underwater welding operation, and Lindsay lashes out at Gerard Kirkhill here for some odd reason. But Kirkhill just says he's just following orders. Following that, Bendix here radios the divers and asks to get someone. Get those wetsuits on because we're going deep. Here in the dark recesses of the ocean, these divers are busy on construction on whatever this big thingamajig is.
It's a call from topside, that new company man.
Going inside this underwater building, Virgil Brigman, or Bud for short, says he's the storm approaching that call from topside. Bud answers the phone, but isn't too happy with what he's hearing. On the other hand, deep dive weldman Arliss Sonny Dawson here is patching up some metal while being assisted with some handy mini-subs. Bud suddenly calls everyone to stop what they're doing and return to base. Bud gives them the news that his latest orders came from topside because national security is involved. There goes their oil rig gig. They all gather around what the Navy has to say, and basically, they broke out one of their expensive toys. To be specific, a $4 billion nuclear submarine just sank for spooky unknown reasons.
Don't you guys have your own stuff for this kind of thing?
Their facility is going to be used for a rescue mission codenamed Operation Salvor. At first, they don't want to take the job, but then the money talks. Alright, special bonuses, here we come, right? Nah, Bud, the leader of this oil rig, thinks his team is underqualified for it. It's fine though, because Lieutenant Hiram Coffey is gonna go down there and supervise the mission. Bud reluctantly agrees, but if things go out of hand, Bud's gonna quit the mission along with his team. Bud and his oil hicks get moving.
Roger, 5 degrees left, Bud.
Then he gets a message from topside that a freak hurricane is coming to shake things up. Bud then meets his estranged wife Lindsay, and oh boy, let's just say their reunion goes peachy, I guess. Bud shuts his wife off, so his wife does the logical thing, deep dive into a small submarine with other men on board. Meanwhile, Bud is still busy cruising. Then he lets Lisa, one night standing, take the reins with a banging country song to ride them off. Suddenly the party's over when Lindsay comes in docking with the sub. Bud's not happy about this, but Alan, Hippie Carnes, looks a bit thrilled for this mission.
The bad news is we got 8 hours and this can blowing down.
Looks like the men with Lindsay are Navy SEALs, and they all get briefed while they get pressured by Catfish DeVries to be let in. Once they're done, Catfish lets them in. Lindsay then meets an old pal named Jammer Willis. Then the SEALs set up shop. Lindsay meets up with the rest of the crew, including her husband, much to her distaste. Speaking of that distaste, they argue like the ex-couple that they are. Lindsay gets his room, then Bud throws his wedding ring down the toilet after their little lovers quarrel. Well, Bud then sticks his hand back in the bowl a little later, and there goes his regrets. The SEALs then brief the team about the operation and how they're gonna go down to the bottom. But Hippie then gets concerned about the radiation leak that may or may not come out of the sub. But regardless, Lieutenant Coffey wants everyone to follow his orders. No discussion. Someone dove on the wrong side of the sea. They get geared up, then Lou notices Bud's hand is blue thanks to his toilet escapade. The rest of the crew gets some neat equipment, being one of them is this oxygenated fluid that you can breathe, as demonstrated by this rat here.
He's taking the fluid into his lungs.
After that party trick, it's game time. The fleet begins their descent, and some of them are on wetsuits to clearly scope out the scene. Eventually, they find the back turbines of the sub, and there it is. Once the fleet gets into position, the SEALs take the plunge and begin opening the sub. Helping them is Hippie piloting the sub drone. They enter the vessel while Lindsay checks out the sub's missiles. They're still intact, but don't sigh out of relief just yet. These bad boys are rocking 192 nuclear warheads. So be warned, Hippie surveys the inner area for radiation. Then he gives the SEALs the green light to enter.
Keep heading for the bow.
While the SEALs are out back, Lieutenant Coffee is leading some of the oil workers in wetsuits to explore the front hull breach. After a while, they find their first body. And it's downhill from here, boys and girls. Time to let the bodies hit the ocean floor because there's a lot of them in this control room. Lieutenant Coffee tells them to split up into 2 teams to explore more, and Bud is going to lead one of them. Jammer begins to panic further because everyone in that room is sleeping with the fishes. Bud takes his place and goes in further. After a few minutes, the rope that Bud asked to hold onto gets snapped. So Jammer begins to panic again. That's when this ominous blue light appears. Jammer freaks out and he convulses once Bud gets a hold of him.
It's his mixture, too much oxygen.
The rest of the team escorts him out. Then outside, all of the power in Lindsay's sub runs out. Suddenly, a fast-moving blue light source is seen zipping to and fro. Lindsay sees it, then it disappears into the abyss. Back in the sub, Jammer slips in a coma. Then, Lindsay says she doesn't want to talk about what she saw because she'll look cuckoo to them. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Coffee reports this back to his superiors and just dismissed it as a Russian vessel. Typical Americans. Here's the SEAL's next mission. Get 1 warhead, arm it, and wait for further orders. In another cabin, most of the oil workers gather around the news that a spit between Russian and American forces are brewing near Cuba.
There is a tremendous amount of activity.
If you played Red Alert, then you know where this is going. Because of this, Hippie gets sussy over the SEALs' involvement now that World War III is just right around the corner. Suddenly, Bud gets news that the SEALs are stealing a sub from the oil rig. He tries to stop them, but to no avail. Topside and the oil workers need the flatbed sub that the SEALs stole in order to get unhooked and avoid the horrible hurricane. But the SEALs have a 2-hour job to do. Speaking of flatbed, there she is, being used to extract a nuclear missile. After their little nuclear joyride, flatbed is returned by the SEALs, and they discreetly take the extracted missile somewhere hidden. One Knight immediately gets to work to get unhooked, but the Typhoon is making some huge waves.
We got a problem. What's going on?
Soon, the rig gets dragged. Because of the damage, Topside's crane cuts loose and it crashes down the rig, anticlimactically. That's until it tumbles down and drags the entire rig south. A lot of destruction and chaos takes place in the rig. Then, the dragging of the rig stops at the very edge of this underwater cliff. Water breaches a few rooms, and Bud watches a few of his men drown. He nearly drowned as well, if it weren't for his wedding ring and Sonny and Catfish's help. With the destruction over for now, the rig is left in partial ruins. Sonny keeps trying to call for an SOS while Lieutenant Coffee passes the blame for his orders to Bud, and he just doesn't care right now.
Bud, there won't be enough to run the heaters.
Some more bad news. Lindsay did diagnostics, and this place only has a few hours before it becomes as cold as Elsa's Ice Kingdom. Then, 12 hours left for oxygen breathing. Bud thanks Lynn for her effort. Then he gets the numbers from Hippie. 4 men are in Davy Jones' locker. Linz is walking outside, trying to look for more oxygen tanks. Bud, back in the rig, tells about his history with Linz and how they were an item. Speaking of Lindsay, Hippie monitors her up until another blackout occurs. Let me guess, it's another one of those bioluminescent aliens. It shows up right behind Linz, and that's not all. An even bigger alien rises up. You know what? Linz absolutely goes and touches the darn thing. Thankfully, it doesn't mind, and it descends right after. Hopefully, Linz's camera caught that. Well, the camera catches it, but it just looks like a glow stick dropping.
Now, Lindsay,
There is something down there.
Linz calls these things non-terrestrial intelligence. Bud doesn't buy it, but Linz tries to convince him that there's something out there. Bud's still reluctant, and so is Lieutenant Coffee, who lives up to his name and is on the edge. He wants 24-hour surveillance on those Russian drones, but they're insubordinate, so Bud leads his team the right way. Speaking of surveillance, Hippie is using his drone to spy on the SEALs, and it looks like they're taking apart a nuclear MIRV.
Look, they hotwire one of the nukes.
Hippie snitches to Bud, then Linz walks on them. Linz freaks out, and an infighting breaks out. Bud has the others to cool their jets. Then they get out there. Lieutenant Coffee, on the other hand, thinks that they can't be trusted. Bud wants Linz to cool her tongue because Lieutenant Coffee looks like he's having an anxiety attack. Plus, he's got a nuke. So Linz hatches a plan along with Hippie to use his drone to catch some alien footage so that she could prove to Coffee that the Motherlands haven't invaded these depths. It's been a long mission, so Linz gets some coffee. Then she calms down next to her sleeping crew. Unbeknownst to them, something's approaching the rig. The alien is here in the docking bay and makes its way to the rig's hulls. It even managed to open one of the hatches leading to the crew's sleeping quarters. Lynn sees this and she wakes the entire crew up. There it is, the alien. At first, they were freaked out by it, but soon it mimicked each of their faces in an attempt to communicate in a friendly way. Lynn touches it and it tastes like seawater.
Where the hell's it going?
They chase it and it takes a look at the nuke. On the other end, Coffee and his men see it, so he shuts the hatch on it. That's not a good sign. Hippie thinks that the tentacle might just be a surveillance apparatus. Then Coffee gets on the edge yet again. He arms himself as he goes on a megalomania spree with priming these guns. Looks like he's even taking the nuke somewhere else. Hippie spies on the SEALs while they lower his drone armed with a nuclear MIRV. Hippie then gets caught by Coffee and unlucky. He's broke up to his oil rig pals. Then they hold them at gunpoint. Hippie snitches that they're gonna use the drone to take the warhead to the aliens to start a deep-sea nuclear winter. Coffee gets them locked in. Then they say that the warhead is set to go off in 3 hours. Coffee gets to work while bootleg Rambo Schoenig gets sermonized by the oil workers and his comrade that they're gonna get easily caught in the blast. Lenz keeps at it with the sermons, and look who opens the door. It's Jammer, and he's got Schoenig's gun. They're all freed.
I was dead back there when I saw that angel coming for me.
But the hatch leading to the sub bay has been locked off by Coffee. Bud thinks there's only one thing to do: swim to the other side and open it from there. Amazingly, they do this and they don't get crushed by the water pressure. Despite the freezing water, the boys make it to the other hatch, but it's locked too. There's only one way: swim to the bay itself. Catfish stays put because he can't make it, so Bud goes alone. He silently spies at Coffee, who looks like he's about to go full schizo mode. Then he swims to the other side and quietly gets a blunt object to try and take Coffee out. Guess what? He's on full alert, but his pistol is empty. I guess it's time for the next phase, CQC. Bud leads with the pipe, but Coffee's got a knife.
He can't make it to the door.
They both lose their weapons in the fight, but Coffee gets the upper hand. Bud's down for the count until Catfish is there to bring down the hammer. Coffee flees and steals Flatbed with the missiles attached to it. The rest of the crew comes and tries to shoot him down with an Uzi, but Bud suits up and latches onto Flatbed. Bud ties the drone down, so Coffee notices this and comes for him. Right on the cusp of a collision, Linz comes in for the save. The crash causes some major damage to Flatbed. Then Linz lets Bud in her sub. Big Geek, the sub drone, is beginning to cut loose, so they chase after it.
Where is he, Bud? You see him?
But Coffee is back. Big Geek takes a tumble downwards, so time isn't on their side here. An underwater chase begins, and strap in because it's a heck of a bumpy one. They ravage the underwater landscape with their chase, and it becomes a full-on underwater robot wars. With the last blow being struck by Linz, Coffee gets pulled to the edge, and with a last glance, Flatbed falls down the underwater cliff. The pressure is too much for Flatbed, so cue explosion. Now that Coffee's gone, they have a new problem. They're struggling with comms, and the sub is just dredged on the perch of the cliff.
You got any tools?
I don't know.
Plus, not to mention, the sub is taking in quite the leak. It's about 70 yards from here to the oil rig, so they need help, and they need it fast. The water is rising, and if they do get out of there, the water is freezing cold. Linz asks Bud to swim back and bring back another suit, but he estimates that it's gonna be a 7 to 8 minute swim. Time is running out, so they try to look for options. Bud intends to drown for his ex-lady, but the lady wants to drown, and she thinks that the freezing water will slow down her systems long enough for Bud and the others to tow the sub back and maybe revive her. Sounds like a lot of gambling on the table, Linz. Bud reluctantly agrees, so he gets his gear, and guess what? He freaks out at the last second and she drowns. Bud lets out a scream probably even the aliens can hear. Then he gets on swimming. Once he's out in the water, he swims and finally receives radio contact from his crew. Bud tells them to ready the infirmary. The crew gets to it on the double. Then they do everything they can with the revival equipment. Paddles are on and clear. Zap her another one. They pump some oxygen into her, but no luck. Bud is running out of options, so it's time to do some old-fashioned CPR. Bud tries desperately, but Catfish calms him down and says it's over. The crew silently looks into her lifeless husk, but Bud refuses to absolutely throw in the towel. He pumps her some more air. Then he orders One Night to zap her again. No luck. Bud is really on his wit's end, and he even gets mad at Linz for throwing in the towel. To the point, he even slaps her twice. He says he's gotta fight, and holy fish in a barrel, Lindsay is alive and breathing. That's quite the action for the crew. Soon, Linz is taking to bed and she's recovering, so Bud finally rekindles some of that marriage flame with her.
I felt better.
Linz gets some laughs into her, then it's back to the mission. Bud gets suited like an astronaut, and one of the SEALs says that he's gonna be weighted like a brick so he can fall easily. The next mission? Time to go after Big Geek. Disarm the nuke, then he's gonna cut the wire and come back fine. Of course, Linz is kinda against this, but it's a dirty job, so someone's gotta do it. Then it's liquid time. At first it goes smoothly, but then once Bud takes in the liquid, he's gonna have a few violent hiccups. But it's okay. The SEAL says he and his mates have breathed this stuff for 9 months, so it just takes some getting used to. Bud is responsive and he even tests the keypad. It feels weird, but too late. Time to get in the pool. Hippie loudly says that the drone that will taxi him, Little Geek, already has a course going to Big Geek and the bomb. So all he has to do is walk this underwater dog drone. He begins the walk and Lord, it looks dark and freezing. Before the fall to the cliff, he waves goodbye to the crew, possibly for the last time. He's going down at a fast rate and he's reached 4,800 feet.
You just set a record for the deepest suit dive.
That's literally a new deep suit dive record. That cliff is as deep as and he's approaching 10,000 feet deep already. Ensign Monk, the only sane SEAL left, wants to know how it feels. Guess what? The dude is shaking. No surprises there. So one night tells Lindsay to talk to him about normal things. Lindsay then talks to him about some stuffy feelings, and he's getting 12,000 feet of water. The signal is fading, so the team's gotta conserve power. Bud is losing it because he's at 16,000 feet already. Then Little Geek bites it. Bud opens up a light stick and he's tumbling uncontrollably at 20,000 feet. Despite this, Linz doesn't give up and keeps talking to him. Bud, buddy, you aren't alone. Your wife is still here. Catfish even gives his voice and the Budster types back. Suddenly, he says there's light everywhere and bingo, there's the nuke.
It's the blue wire with the white stripe.
Time to disarm this thing. Ensign talks it through him over the comms. Now they need to know his oxygen levels. Whoopee, there's 5 minutes worth. Wait, it took him 30 minutes to get down there. Linz orders her husband Virgil to dip, but Bud stays to finish the job. He knew this was a one-way trip, so he types his last words to his beloved. Suddenly, a light of hope arrives. It's one of those bioluminescent aliens. It offers a lift, so it drags Bud back to a whole nother world. The alien drags Bud to this oxygenized chamber, and he gets to breathe air for the first time. Bud literally says howdy, but the aliens then watch human TV?
Did you know what's going on up there?
Well, it sounds like there's chaos going on topside because there's giant tsunamis everywhere. The aliens are doing this because humanity's about to go into a nuclear war. The waves are really riling up and rising towards every major city on the planet. That's until it stops at its peak and it recedes. Looks like the aliens hear Bud's plea, all because of his selfless sacrifice to disarm the nuke. The intergalactic trial is over, and humanity is found not guilty. Eventually, Topside finally makes contact and they ask for a rescue. Suddenly, Bud types back after a long time. Bud relays the alien's message and it basically says stop playing with things that could end the world.
I'm getting some awful big readings here.
Suddenly, the rig shakes. And holy cow, that's a bright mothership coming up. It even surfaces, and it has more than half the naval fleet and the rig. The aliens even thought of decompression, so the crew came out fine. Out there waiting as well is Virgil Brigman, our very own Bud, the alien ambassador, riding out one final kiss. That's it for The Abyss. Starring Ed Harris, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, and Michael Biehn. Which underwater alien did you fancy? Let us know at the comments below using #CinemaRecap, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.